The Mercedes-Benz S-Class idled in the circular driveway of the $800 million luxury villa as snowflakes descended on Christmas Eve, each one catching the glow from 10,000 twinkling lights adorning the Italian Renaissance facade. Inside, a woman stood frozen in the marble foyer, the same woman who had signed the original deed to this property 7 years ago under her maiden name, back when her husband knew nothing of her true identity or the empire she'd built before they ever met. He approached now with keys jangling, his mistress clinging to his arm, her lip curled in contempt as she prepared to spit directly into his wife's face. The locks had already been changed that morning. Every deadbolt, every electronic panel, every security code altered while his wife attended what she believed was a romantic Christmas Eve brunch. What this man didn't know, what his mistress couldn't possibly fathom, what would only reveal itself in the devastating hours to come, was that the woman he was kicking out into the December cold was the original owner of every stone, every crystal chandelier, every priceless artifact housed within these walls. The property records buried under corporate shells and trusts told a story he'd never bothered to investigate, and his arrogance would cost him everything. But how did a woman who owned an $800 million estate end up married to a man who knew nothing of her wealth? What had she been hiding all these years, and why? What could the original owner possibly do next that would crush a man who believed himself untouchable? And when the truth finally detonated, would anything remain of the life he thought he'd stolen? The first flakes of snow had begun falling at 2:47 p.m. Victoria remembered because she'd checked her watch while her husband, Brandon Hawthorne, suggested they cancel their Christmas Eve brunch reservation. She'd convinced him to go anyway, not knowing it would be the last normal moment of her marriage. 7 years earlier, Victoria Ashford had stood in this same foyer under different circumstances entirely. At 28, she just closed the most significant real estate acquisition of her career, an $800 million purchase of the historic Rosewood estate, a sprawling 45,000 square foot villa that had taken her investment firm 3 years to negotiate. The previous owners, an aging oil dynasty, had finally relented after Victoria's team structured a deal that preserved their legacy while transferring the deed into a labyrinth of trusts and corporate entities she designed specifically for privacy. Her lawyer had questioned the elaborate structure. "Why hide your ownership, Miss Ashford? You've earned this." Victoria had gazed up at the hand-painted ceiling where cherubs danced among clouds. "Because the moment people know what you own, they see you differently. They want something. They take something. I've watched it happen my entire life." She'd grown up watching her mother's family torn apart by wealth, cousins turning on cousins, siblings in decades-long litigation, marriages that were nothing more than corporate mergers. When Victoria built her fortune through a combination of inherited seed capital and ruthless business intelligence, she'd sworn she'd do things differently. She'd keep her wealth compartmentalized, hidden, protected. She'd find someone who loved her for herself, not her portfolio. That someone had been Brandon Hawthorne. They'd met at a charity gala where Victoria attended under her mother's maiden name, introduced simply as a consultant. Brandon managed a mid-sized investment firm, successful enough to be comfortable, small enough that he'd never crossed paths with the elite circles where Victoria's true identity lived. He'd been charming, funny, seemingly genuine in a room full of calculation. Their courtship had been refreshingly normal. Dinner dates, weekend hikes, movie nights where they debated plot holes and shared popcorn. "I love that you're not obsessed with money," Brandon had told her 6 months into their relationship, his head in her lap as they watched the sunset from a modest rental overlooking the ocean. "My ex, she only cared about status and luxury. You're real." Victoria had stroked his hair and said nothing. The irony tasted bitter even then. When they married, Victoria maintained her financial separation carefully. She worked from home as a remote consultant, explaining her flexible schedule and comfortable income without revealing the 8-figure annual returns from her investment portfolio. The Rosewood estate remained closed, its staff reduced to a skeleton crew of caretakers who maintained the property under the belief it belonged to a European investment consortium. They lived in a beautiful but modest 4-bedroom home in an upscale suburb, a house Victoria owned through another corporate entity, though Brandon believed they were renting. She'd told herself the deception was temporary, that she'd reveal everything when the time was right, when she was certain his love was unshakable. She never got the chance. The first crack appeared 18 months into their marriage. Victoria found a receipt for jewelry she'd never received, a diamond bracelet purchased from Cartier on their anniversary, the same day Brandon had given her a simple silver necklace she pretended to adore. "I can explain," he'd said when confronted, his face flushing. "It's for a client, a closing gift." She'd wanted to believe him. The alternative was too painful. The second crack came 6 months later. Unfamiliar perfume on his collar, late-night work emergencies that grew increasingly frequent, a new password on his phone. Victoria hired a private investigator, not a firm from her usual network, but a small-time operator who wouldn't connect the dots to Victoria Ashford. Billionaire. The photographs arrived 3 weeks before Christmas. Brandon with a woman at restaurants Victoria had suggested they visit, but he'd claimed were too expensive. Brandon with the same woman entering a hotel, leaving 4 hours later with satisfied smiles. The woman was younger, prettier, dripping with jewelry. Victoria now understood Brandon had been buying with credit cards she didn't know existed. Credit cards he'd opened using their shared accounts and her forged signature. The investigator's report included her name, Melody Prescott, 26, an aspiring influencer who'd attached herself to Brandon like a barnacle to a yacht. Her social media showed glimpses of her generous boyfriend, carefully cropped photos that never quite showed his face, but displayed plenty of designer shopping bags and first-class travel. Victoria had cried for 3 days. Then she'd stopped crying and started planning. She could divorce him quietly, take her secrets and her fortune, and disappear. But something darker whispered in her mind, a memory of her mother's warning years ago. Men who betray you when they think you're ordinary will destroy you when they discover you're extraordinary. Never reveal your power to someone who's already shown you who they are. Victoria decided to wait and watch. She documented everything, the credit card fraud, the embezzlement she discovered when she hacked into Brandon's company accounts. He'd been skimming money for 8 months, hiding it in offshore accounts. The apartment he'd leased for Melody under a false name. She built a case that would survive any courtroom, all while playing the oblivious wife. What she didn't anticipate was how bold Brandon would become. The Christmas Eve brunch had been his idea, a romantic gesture, he'd called it, to make up for being distant lately. They'd gone to an upscale bistro downtown where Brandon had been uncharacteristically attentive, holding her hand, reminiscing about their early days together. Victoria noticed he kept checking his watch. When they returned home at 4 p.m., Brandon's car wasn't alone in the driveway. A white BMW sat beside his Mercedes, and standing on the front porch were Melody Prescott and a locksmith finishing his work on their door. "What's happening?" Victoria had asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Brandon's expression shifted, the mask of the loving husband cracking to reveal something cold beneath. "Victoria, we need to talk. I'm done pretending." "Pretending what?" "That this marriage works, that I'm happy, that I don't deserve better." Melody descended the porch steps, her designer heels clicking against stone. She wore a white fur coat, the same one Victoria had seen in Brandon's credit card statements, listed as a $15,000 charge. Up close, she was even younger than her photos suggested, her face sharp with entitlement. "You need to leave," Melody said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "This is our home now." Victoria looked at Brandon. "Our home? Brandon, what is she talking about?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer says that, given the circumstances, your lack of employment, our prenup, you're entitled to almost nothing. I'm keeping the house." "The house we rent?" "The house I've been paying for," Brandon corrected. "You've contributed nothing. You've been a financial burden for 3 years, Victoria. Melody and I deserve a fresh start, and we're taking it. Your things are packed. They're in the garage." The performance was almost impressive. He'd convinced himself this house was his, that her contributions were meaningless, that he held all the cards. Victoria stood very still, snowflakes catching in her hair. "You changed the locks." "Had to," Brandon said, finding his courage now that Melody stood beside him. Can't risk you making a scene or stealing anything." "Stealing?" Victoria's laugh was hollow. "From my own home? Don't be dramatic. You have 20 minutes to collect your boxes and leave, or I'm calling the police for trespassing." Melody stepped closer, so close Victoria could smell her expensive perfume, the one from Brandon's collar all those months. The younger woman's eyes glittered with triumph. Then she spat. The saliva hit Victoria's cheek, warm and shocking. Melody smiled, slow and cruel. "Merry Christmas, you pathetic gold digger. Oh, wait, you didn't even dig any gold, did you? You just leeched off Brandon while he worked himself to death supporting your lazy ass." Brandon said nothing. Didn't defend her. Didn't rebuke Melody. He just watched. His silence a confirmation of everything Victoria needed to know about who he'd become, or perhaps who he'd always been. Victoria reached up and wiped her cheek with her coat sleeve. When she spoke, her voice carried a quality neither Brandon nor Melody had heard before. The voice of someone who commanded boardrooms, who negotiated billion-dollar deals, who owned more before breakfast than they'd see in their lifetimes. "I need to make a phone call. May I have 5 minutes?" Brandon checked his watch. 3 minutes, then you're gone." Victoria walked to her car, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number she'd programmed years ago under a fake contact name. Her attorney, the real one, from the firm that handled her $2.3 billion portfolio, answered on the first ring. "Victoria, are you all right? You sound—" "Execute Protocol Phoenix," Victoria said calmly. "Full disclosure, immediate implementation. I want every document filed by end of business today." Silence, then. "Are you certain? Once we begin, there's no—" "I'm standing outside my $800 million property while my husband and his mistress order me to leave. They changed the locks, Richard. On Christmas Eve, they changed the locks to my house." Another pause. Jesus Christ. "Okay, Protocol Phoenix is live. I'll have a team there within the hour." "Victoria, I'm sorry." "Don't be. Just execute." She ended the call and returned to the porch where Brandon and Melody stood in the doorway, like they owned the place. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. "Time's up," Brandon said. "Keys, now." Victoria removed her key ring and held it up. "These keys don't work anymore anyway, do they? New locks. Just leave them on the porch railing and go." She complied, setting them down gently. Then she turned and walked to the garage where 3 small boxes sat in the corner, her clothes, a few books, the small mementos of a life that had been a lie. She loaded them into her car while Brandon and Melody watched from the doorway, Melody's arm wrapped possessively around his waist. As Victoria opened her car door, Melody called out, "Don't come back. Next time we'll have you arrested." Victoria paused, looked back at the house, at the life she'd tried to build, at the husband she'd loved, at the woman who'd stolen him. "You know what the saddest part is? I really loved you, Brandon. The real you. Or who I thought was the real you. The real me deserves better than a woman who can't even hold a job," he shot back. Victoria smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Yes, I suppose you're right. You do deserve better, and now you'll get exactly what you deserve." She drove away slowly, carefully, obeying the speed limit even as her hands shook on the wheel. She drove for 15 minutes before pulling into a parking lot and allowing herself to cry. Not for Brandon, not anymore, but for the fantasy she'd believed in, for the normal life that had never been real. Then she dried her eyes, reapplied her lipstick, and drove to the Four Seasons, where the presidential suite was always kept available under her corporate account. The concierge greeted her by name, her real name. "Ms. Ashford, welcome back. Your suite is ready. Shall I have your belongings brought up?" "Yes, thank you, David. Will you be staying through the holidays?" Victoria thought about Brandon and Melody settling into her house, probably popping champagne, celebrating their victory. "Just a few days. I have some business to attend to after Christmas." The suite was pristine. 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Victoria stood at those windows as the sun set, watching the lights come on across the skyline, each one representing someone living their life, pursuing their happiness, unaware that 15 miles away, 2 people were about to discover what happened when you stole from someone who owned everything. Her phone rang. Richard again. Documents are filed. The process servers will deliver to both Brandon and Ms. Prescott at 8 a.m. sharp on December 26th. The media packets go out simultaneously. Victoria, are you sure you want the public exposure? Once this breaks, I'm sure. Every detail, Richard, every document. I want the whole story public. What he did, what she did, who I really am. All of it. The fallout will be significant for everyone involved. Good. She ended the call and ordered room service. Lobster thermidor, caviar, a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She ate alone, toasted the empty room, and slept the dreamless sleep of someone who'd finally stopped pretending. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold. Victoria woke early, worked out in the hotel gym, had breakfast in her suite while reviewing the documents Richard's team had prepared overnight. The divorce filing was comprehensive. Detailed evidence of Brandon's affair, the credit card fraud, the embezzlement from his own company, the forged signatures. But that was just the opening salvo. The real revelation came in Exhibit A, certified property records showing that Victoria Ashford, not Victoria Hawthorne, not the joint trust Brandon assumed existed, was the sole owner of the Rosewood estate, the $800 million luxury villa he'd kicked her out of, the house he'd claimed as his own. Exhibit B detailed Victoria's actual net worth, $2.3 billion in liquid and non-liquid assets accumulated over 15 years of strategic investments, real estate acquisitions, and venture capital that had turned small startups into major players. Exhibit C was the prenuptial agreement Brandon had insisted on, the one designed to protect his assets from her supposed gold digging, the one that would now protect her billions from him. At noon, Victoria received a text from an unknown number. A photo of Brandon and Melody in the master bedroom of the Rosewood estate, champagne glasses raised, Melody's hand displaying a massive engagement ring. No message, just the photo, a taunt. Victoria saved it to the legal file and went about her Christmas. She called her mother in Zurich, spoke with her half-sister in London, exchanged messages with friends who knew her as Victoria Ashford, CEO and investor, not Victoria Hawthorne, unemployed housewife. They asked about Brandon. Most of her true circle had never met him, didn't even know he existed. She'd compartmentalized so completely. We're separating, she told them simply. Details to follow. The day passed slowly. Victoria knew what was coming in the morning, had planned every moment of it, but waiting felt like drowning in slow motion. She slept badly Christmas night. December 26th, 8:03 a.m. Victoria's phone rang. Richard. It's done. Process servers delivered simultaneously. Brandon at the estate, Ms. Prescott at her apartment. We also served his company's board of directors. They were unaware of his embezzlement. And Victoria? The media has it now. The story breaks in 20 minutes. Thank you, Richard. He's going to call. Probably soon. Maybe don't answer. I'll think about it. But she knew she would answer. She wanted to hear his voice when his world collapsed. The call came at 8:47 a.m. Brandon's voice was strangled. Victoria, Victoria. What the fuck is happening? There are lawyers here. There are people with cameras. They're saying you own this house. They're saying you're some kind of, that you're a billionaire? Victoria supplied calmly. Yes, Brandon. That's exactly what I am. That's impossible. You're lying. This is some kind of... The property records are public now. Have your lawyer check them. The Rosewood estate, the $800 million luxury villa you kicked me out of on Christmas Eve, has been mine since 2018. I purchased it 3 years before we even met. Silence, then. No, you're a consultant. You work from home. You barely make... I am the founder and CEO of Ashford Global Investments. I manage a portfolio worth $2.3 billion. The house you're standing in is one of 17 properties I own worldwide. Brandon, I could buy your entire company with the interest my accounts generate in a month. She heard him breathing, ragged and desperate. In the background, voices, lawyers probably, and process servers, and maybe Melody screaming something unintelligible. Why? His voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know if you'd love me when you thought I was ordinary. Turns out you didn't even love me then. Victoria, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake. Melody means nothing. I'll end it right now, I swear. Just call off your lawyers, please. The time for please was before you changed my locks, before you stole from me, before your mistress spat in my face. She didn't mean to spit on the woman who owns the house she was playing queen in? The woman she called a gold digger while wearing jewelry bought with stolen credit cards? Victoria's voice hardened. Check your accounts, Brandon. All of them. The ones you thought were hidden. I've documented everything. Every fraudulent charge, every forged signature, every dollar you embezzled from your own company. You hacked my accounts? I protected my interests. And now? Now your company's board knows what you did. The IRS knows. The district attorney's office will know by noon. You're not just losing me, Brandon. You're losing everything. Please. He was crying now. Please, Victoria. I love you. I made a mistake. Don't do this. You love me? You changed the locks to my own house. You invited your mistress to humiliate me. You planned to leave me with nothing. She paused, letting that sink in. The only mistake you made was not bothering to check who you were really married to. The media is here, he said, his voice hollow. They're taking pictures. They know everything. My partners are calling. Victoria, this will destroy me. Yes, she said simply. It will. Merry Christmas, Brandon. She ended the call. Over the next 3 hours, Victoria watched the story explode across every media platform. Her publicist, a woman who'd worked for her for 8 years, had orchestrated the release with surgical precision. The narrative was perfect. Billionaire wife deceived by cheating husband who didn't know he was stealing from one of the world's wealthiest women. The headlines wrote themselves, 800 Mir Villa Showdown. Wife kicked out of her own estate. Billionaire played housewife, husband never knew. Christmas Eve betrayal, the most expensive divorce mistake ever. The photos were even better. Someone had captured Brandon and Melody being escorted from the Rosewood estate by security. Victoria's security, finally revealed after years of operating in the shadows. Melody's face was twisted in rage and tears. Brandon looked hollow, destroyed. Social media exploded. Melody's Instagram, once aspirational content about her perfect life, became a graveyard of comments. You spat on a billionaire. She was playing 4D chess while you thought you won checkers. Imagine being that confidently wrong. By afternoon, new details emerged. Brandon's company had fired him. The embezzlement charges were being pressed. The IRS had frozen his accounts. His assets, which consisted primarily of debt and the illusion of wealth, were being seized. Melody released a tearful video claiming she'd been deceived, that she didn't know Brandon was married, that she was a victim too. The internet destroyed her in minutes, resurfacing old posts where she'd bragged about stealing someone's man, where she'd mocked basic wives who couldn't keep their husbands happy. Victoria watched it all from her suite, feeling nothing, not satisfaction, not vindication, just a deep, aching tiredness. Her phone rang again, not Brandon this time, her mother. Victoria, darling, I saw the news. Hi, Mom. Are you all right? Honestly, I don't know yet. He was a fool. They both were. I know. What will you do now? Victoria looked around the suite. Beautiful, expensive, empty. I think I'll travel. Take some time. Figure out who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone smaller. That sounds wise. And Victoria, I'm proud of you for protecting yourself, for knowing your worth. After the call, Victoria stood at the window again, watching the city move below. Somewhere out there, Brandon was facing the consequences of his choices. Melody was learning that actions had prices. The life they'd tried to steal was revealed as an illusion they'd never understood. Victoria's phone buzzed, a message from Richard. Brandon's attorney is requesting a meeting. He wants to negotiate the divorce terms. He's offering to walk away from everything if you'll drop the criminal charges. Victoria replied, No negotiation. He stole from me. He humiliated me. He took my kindness for weakness. Full prosecution. I want him to understand exactly what he did. Understood. Victoria, you're crushing him. You know that, right? She thought about Brandon's face when he'd ordered her off her own property, about Melody's spit on her cheek, about the locks changed to her own doors. Good, she typed. That's exactly what I intended. But as she sent the message, Victoria felt something crack inside her. Not satisfaction, but grief. Grief for the marriage she'd wanted, the love she'd believed in, the normal life that had never existed. She'd crushed him, yes. She'd taken everything he thought he had and revealed it as nothing but smoke and mirrors. She'd exposed him to the world, destroyed his reputation, ended his career. She'd won. So why did winning feel so much like losing? Victoria returned to the Rosewood estate 3 days later, not to live, but to walk through it one final time before deciding what to do with it. The staff had been restored, the house cleaned of all traces of Brandon and Melody's brief occupation. She stood in the foyer where she'd been ordered to leave, where she'd been spat upon, where she'd handed over keys to her own property. The house was silent, magnificent, empty. Will you keep it? Her estate manager asked gently. Victoria gazed up at the painted ceiling, at the cherubs dancing among clouds. No, list it. Donate the proceeds to organizations that help women leaving abusive marriages. Women who actually have nothing, unlike me. That's generous. It's necessary. This house was supposed to be my sanctuary. He turned it into a prison, and then I turned it into a weapon. It can't be home anymore. She sold 17 properties over the next month, liquidating the physical spaces where she'd hidden her true self. She kept her investments, her company, her wealth, but she released the need to hide behind it. The divorce was finalized in March. Brandon got nothing. The prenup he'd insisted on protected Victoria's assets completely. The criminal charges moved forward. He'd face trial in the fall for embezzlement and fraud. Melody disappeared from social media, her influencer dreams destroyed by her own cruelty caught on camera, her face forever associated with the woman who spat on a billionaire. And Victoria started over. She moved to Paris, rented a modest apartment overlooking the Seine, and began using her full name everywhere. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more testing people by making herself smaller. She dated cautiously, transparently. When someone asked what she did, she said, I manage investments. I'm quite successful. If they were intimidated, they weren't right for her. If they were interested only in her money, they weren't right either. But if they saw her, really saw her, and stayed, that might be worth exploring. 1 year after that Christmas Eve, Victoria received a letter. Prison stationery, Brandon's handwriting. She almost threw it away. Almost. Instead, she opened it. Victoria, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because my therapist here says I need to take accountability, and he's right. I convinced myself you were the problem, that you weren't enough, that I deserved more. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of real intimacy, real vulnerability, real love. Melody wasn't better than you. She was easier. She let me be shallow. You required depth I didn't have. When I found out who you really were, my first reaction wasn't shame for how I treated you. It was rage that you'd lied. It took me months to understand. You didn't lie. You tested, and I failed. You asked me once what the saddest part was. I know now, the saddest part is that you loved me enough to want to be ordinary for me, and I couldn't even love ordinary you. How could I ever have deserved extraordinary you? I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I was too blind and broken to see what I had. I hope you find someone who sees you. All of you. And loves every part. Brandon Victoria read the letter twice, then filed it away. She didn't respond. Some bridges once burned should stay ashes, but she kept the letter as a reminder. The most expensive things in life aren't measured in dollars. They're measured in trust, in vulnerability, in the courage to be seen. Brandon had seen her as ordinary and rejected her. He'd learned she was extraordinary, and it crushed him. But the real crushing, Victoria understood now, wasn't what she'd done to him. It was what he'd done to himself. The moment he changed the locks on a love that could have transformed his life, If only he'd been brave enough to deserve it. The $800 million villa sold for $875 million. Victoria donated every penny to 3 women's shelters, a legal fund for domestic abuse survivors, and a scholarship program for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. She bought a new house, smaller, warmer, with her name on the deed and no secrets in the walls. And she lived honestly, openly, powerfully. The woman who'd been kicked out on Christmas Eve had crushed the man who underestimated her, not with revenge, but with the simple truth of her worth. And in the end, that was the greatest power of all. The gallery opening in Soho hummed with Manhattan's art elite, collectors in understated designer wear, critics with practiced expressions of boredom, champagne flutes catching light from carefully positioned spotlights. Victoria stood before a particular painting, studying the brushwork with genuine interest, unaware she was being watched. The composition is derivative, don't you think? She turned to find a man beside her, tall, salt and pepper hair, laugh lines around intelligent gray eyes. He wore a blazer over a simple t-shirt, expensive watch, comfortable shoes. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze remained fixed on the canvas. Derivative of what? Victoria asked. Rothko, obviously, but without the emotional depth, it's technically competent, but spiritually empty. He glanced at her then, and his expression shifted. Recognition, though not the kind she'd grown weary of. You're thinking I'm an insufferable art snob, Victoria smiled. I'm thinking you might be right about the painting. Jude Morrison, he extended his hand. Architect, failed painter, current sufferer of foot and mouth disease. Victoria Ashford, she shook his hand. Investor, failed wife. Current appreciator of honest opinions. Ashford, he tilted his head. Wait, the Victoria Ashford? The Christmas Eve villa situation? Here it came. Victoria's smile cooled. That's me. Jesus, I followed that story. Not the tabloid stuff, the actual business case studies. What you built, how you structured your holdings. It was brilliant. I used your portfolio diversification strategy as a teaching example at Columbia last semester. He paused. Also, your ex-husband was an idiot. Victoria laughed, surprised, genuine. You taught my divorce. I taught your business model. The divorce was just the reveal. Like finding out Bruce Wayne is Batman, except Batman is also a woman who owns half of Lower Manhattan and has better lawyers. I don't own half of Lower Manhattan. Yet, he said, grinning. I looked at your acquisition patterns. You're circling something in Tribeca. Am I wrong? He was right. Victoria studied him with new interest. You're observant. Occupational hazard. I design buildings. I notice how spaces connect. People aren't that different from architecture. It's all about foundations and what they support. He gestured to the painting. Take this. Technically sound foundation, but built to impress rather than express. It'll sell for 6 figures to someone's corporate lobby. You sound disappointed. I believe art should cost you something. Not money, something real. Vulnerability, truth, risk. His expression turned self-deprecating. Listen to me. Insufferable art snob confirmed. No, Victoria said thoughtfully. I think I understand exactly what you mean. They drifted through the gallery together, Jude offering commentary that was equal parts insightful and irreverent. He made her laugh. Actually laugh, the kind that loosened something tight in her chest. When he mentioned he was meeting friends for dinner afterward, he hesitated. This is forward, but would you want to join us? Fair warning, they're all architects, so the conversation will definitely include at least one heated argument about load-bearing walls. Victoria considered. The old instinct whispered to decline, to maintain distance, to protect herself. But she'd promised herself honesty 3 years ago. I'd like that. But full disclosure, I'm wealthy. Very wealthy. If that's going to be weird... I know, Jude said simply. I Googled you while you were looking at the sculptures. You're worth about $2.8 billion now, up from $2.3 billion 3 years ago. Impressive returns in a volatile market. Victoria's defenses rose automatically. And that doesn't bother you? Why would it? I'm not intimidated by competence. He met her eyes directly. Look, I'm financially comfortable. Not your league. but I'm not going to ask you to pay my rent. I'm successful in my field, secure in my masculinity, and old enough to know that a woman's success doesn't diminish mine. If we have dinner and never see each other again, fine. If we see each other again, also fine. Either way, I'm not dating your bank account. How old are you? 47. Old enough to have made my own mistakes and learn from them. You? 38. Old enough to spot red flags. See any? Victoria considered. Not yet, but I'm looking. Good, keep looking. I'll do the same. Dinner was at a small Italian restaurant in the village, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and waiters who'd worked there for 30 years. Jude's friends were exactly as advertised. Brilliant, passionate about their work, completely unconcerned with Victoria's net worth once they discovered she had opinions about urban design. You're restoring the Pemberton building? One of them, Maria, asked excitedly. I heard rumors, but nothing confirmed. Negotiating, Victoria admitted. It's been abandoned for 15 years. The owner wants too much, and the renovation costs are astronomical. But historically significant, Jude said. Art Deco masterpiece, terrible foundation issues, which is why the numbers don't work. Have you considered a public-private partnership, historic preservation tax credits? The city's desperate for someone to save that building. They talked for 2 hours about architecture, about preservation versus progress, about the ways wealth could be used to build rather than just accumulate. Victoria found herself describing her vision for the Pemberton. Mixed-use development with affordable housing, commercial space for local businesses, a public gallery on the ground floor. It's not the most profitable use, she admitted, but profit isn't everything. Maria raised her glass. To profit not being everything. If more billionaires thought like you, the city might actually be livable. Walking Victoria to her car later, Jude said, So that was either the best first date I've ever had or a really excellent business networking dinner. Who says it can't be both? True. He stopped at her Mercedes. She'd stopped hiding what she drove too. Can I see you again? Fair warning, I travel a lot for work. I'm terrible at texting. And I have an ex-wife who's actually my friend, which some people find weird. I travel constantly. I sometimes disappear into work for days. And my ex-husband is in prison, which people definitely find weird. So we're both disasters. Perfect. He handed her his card. Actual paper card, elegant typography. Call me when you're back from wherever you're going next, or don't. But I hope you do. Victoria took the card. I'm going to Tokyo on Thursday. Business for 2 weeks. I'm in Berlin until the 15th. Museum project. He smiled. Terrible timing. The worst. Although, I'm actually in Tokyo the 8th through the 11th. Client meeting. If you happen to be free for dinner. Victoria felt something unfamiliar. Hope, but without the terror that usually accompanied it. I might be free if you promise more architectural opinions. I promise to have opinions about everything. It's my most annoying quality. I look forward to being annoyed. They stood there a moment longer, the city moving around them, two people taking a chance on honesty. Victoria, Jude said quietly, just so we're clear, I know your story. The whole thing. What he did, what you did. I'm not here to fix you or save you or prove I'm different. I'm just here because you're interesting, and I'd like to know you better, as yourself. All of yourself. That's the most romantic thing anyone said to me in years. Really, I was going for honest, not romantic. Maybe they're the same thing. She drove home to her brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, the house she'd bought because she loved it, not because she needed to hide in it. The space was hers, walls painted colors she chose, art she actually liked, furniture that was comfortable rather than impressive. On her desk sat a framed photo from last month, Victoria with her mother and half-sister at a charity gala, all three women in elegant gowns, Victoria's real name on the event program as keynote speaker. No more hiding, no more testing, just truth. Beside it, a newer photo. Victoria with 10 women at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Ashford Women's Center, a comprehensive facility offering legal aid, job training, housing assistance, and therapy for women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse or betrayal. The project had cost her $47 million and had been worth every penny. One of the women in the photo had sent her a card last week. "You gave me back my life." Not with money, though that helped. With the reminder that surviving isn't the same as living. Victoria had cried reading it. Good tears, the kind that meant healing. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jude. "I lied earlier. I'm not terrible at texting. I just didn't want to seem too eager. But I'm 47 and life's short, so here's the truth. Tonight was great. You're brilliant and funny, and I definitely want to see you again. In Tokyo or anywhere else. No games, just interest. Honestly expressed." Victoria smiled and typed back, "I appreciate the honesty. And I'd like to see you again too. Fair warning, I'm going to do a background check on you. Already assumed you would. I'll save you time. No criminal record, good credit, one ex-wife who'll give me a decent reference, 2 cats who think I'm mediocre at best. Cats are excellent judges of character. They really are. See you in Tokyo, Victoria Ashford. See you in Tokyo, Jude Morrison." She set down her phone and poured herself a glass of wine. Nothing ostentatious, just something she enjoyed. She took it to her balcony where she could see the Manhattan skyline across the water, all those lights representing all those lives. Somewhere in that city, in a minimum security facility upstate, Brandon was serving the 4th year of his 7-year sentence. She'd heard through her attorney that he was teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates, trying to rebuild some version of himself. She hoped it was working, not for his sake, for the sake of whoever he became when he got out. Melody had moved to Los Angeles, reinvented herself as a life coach, helping women recover from public mistakes, somehow turning her humiliation into a brand. Victoria found it simultaneously appalling and impressively shameless. But they were no longer her story. They were just the chapter that taught her the cost of hiding. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Victoria Ashford," a young woman's voice, nervous. "Speaking. My name is Rachel Torres. This is strange, but I'm getting divorced. My husband is trying to take everything. He doesn't know I actually own our house, that I have money in accounts under my maiden name. I've been hiding my wealth because I was scared. My lawyer told me about your story, suggested I call. I know this is random, but how did you find the courage to stop hiding?" Victoria closed her eyes, remembering Christmas Eve 3 years ago. The snow, the changed locks, the spit on her face. The moment she'd decided she was done being small. "I didn't find courage," she said gently. "I found my limit. There's a difference." "What do you mean?" "Courage implies bravery. What I felt was just done. Done pretending. Done protecting someone who was stealing from me. Done making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger." She paused. "But here's what I learned after. Hiding isn't protecting yourself. It's slowly erasing yourself. And no relationship worth having requires you to disappear." "I'm so scared," Rachel whispered. "What if people only want me for my money?" "Then they're not your people. Rachel, listen to me. I spent 3 years in a marriage where I hid everything I was, and he still betrayed me. Then I spent 3 years living openly as myself, and you know what I found? The right people aren't scared off by your truth. They're attracted to it." "How do you know who's right?" Victoria thought about Jude, about his directness, his interest in her work, the way he'd Googled her and then showed up anyway. "You don't, not at first. But you give yourself permission to find out. You stop testing in secret and start filtering openly. It's terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Do you regret what you did to your ex-husband?" "I regret marrying him. I don't regret defending myself." Victoria's voice was firm. "He changed the locks to my own house, Rachel. He invited another woman to humiliate me. What I did wasn't revenge. It was consequence. There's a difference." "Thank you," Rachel said, her voice steadier now. "I think I needed to hear that I'm not crazy for protecting myself." "You're not crazy. You're careful. There's wisdom in that. Just don't let careful become invisible." After they hung up, Victoria sat with the conversation, feeling the weight of becoming someone other women called when they needed strength. It was responsibility she hadn't asked for, but wouldn't refuse. The city glittered before her, endless possibilities in steel and glass and light. 3 years ago, she'd been kicked out of an $800 million villa by a man who didn't know she owned it. She'd crushed him with the truth of who she was. Tonight, she'd met someone who knew exactly who she was and was interested anyway. She'd helped a stranger find her courage. She'd built something that mattered more than money. She'd become the woman she'd been hiding all along, powerful, vulnerable, honest, and finally genuinely free. Victoria raised her glass to the skyline, to the future, to the complicated, beautiful mess of living openly. To foundations, she said quietly, and everything they support. The city sparkled back at her, full of promise and possibility. And for the first time in years, Victoria Ashford felt ready for whatever came next. Not because she was fearless, but because she was done being afraid of being seen. And that, she'd learned, made all the difference. 2 years later, Victoria and Jude's architectural firm, Ashford Morrison Design, would win international recognition for transforming abandoned historic buildings into mixed-use developments that prioritize community over profit. The Pemberton building became their flagship project. Affordable housing, local businesses, and a gallery featuring artists who'd experienced financial hardship. Brandon would be released after 5 years, would write a book about financial fraud and redemption that Victoria would never read, and would spend the rest of his life working in nonprofit finance, trying to build something honest from the ruins of his mistakes. Melody's life coaching business would collapse after former clients exposed her methods as manipulative. She'd eventually move home to Iowa, marry a high school teacher, and delete all her social media. Sometimes redemption looks like anonymity. Rachel Torres would divorce her husband, keep her house, and start a consulting firm helping women protect their assets. She'd name Victoria as her inspiration in every interview. And Victoria would continue building. Buildings, businesses, relationships, a life that required no hiding. She'd make mistakes, take risks, love openly, and never again change herself to fit someone else's limited vision. The $800 million villa that started it all would become a domestic violence shelter, its marble halls echoing with the voices of women finding their strength. Full circle. But this time, with all the locks changed to keys only the survivors could hold. This time, everyone knew exactly who owned what, and no one ever stole it again.